All right, so we're actually playing 5, 10, mandatory $20 straddle. Technically not mandatory, but everyone's straddling and it's always on the button. So 5, 10, 20, I'm on the button. The cutoff limps in and I raise it up with Jack 10 offsuit. The cutoff calls. So we go heads up, flop is ace, jack 5, rainbow. Cutoff checks and second pair, showdown value, I check it back. Turn is the 10 of hearts, which brings a backdoor flush draw, giving us 2 pair. He bets out for 80. Could consider a raise. The sizing isn't very big, so it doesn't feel super strong. But I just decided to flat call. River's the 3 of hearts, so the backdoor flush draw comes in. This time he checks it, so it really feels like he's pretty weak, pretty marginal holding. I decided to try and target that range and make a small bet. I bet $100. He thinks for a little bit, but he lets it go. Playing 5-handed in this hand, button straddle on. The 2 blinds limp in. Action starts to the left of the button when the straddle is on. So the 2 blinds, they limp in, and we look down at pocket 8s. I decided to raise it up and make it $100 to go from the cutoff. It folds back to the small blind who calls, and the big blind calls as well. So 3 ways to this flop. Flop is queen 7-6 with 2 hearts. Action checks to me, and I think it's a reasonable decision to bet here. There's a decent number of holdings that I think we can get called by from 2 players. Flush draws, straight draws, smaller pairs. I just decided to check it though because the small blind in particular, he's rather bet happy, rather raise happy player, rather tricky. So I decided to check it back and keep the pot small for now. Turns an offsuit ace. They check to me. I just decide to check it back again. River is a brick, checks to me, and I just check it down. Small blind announces king high. Big blind doesn't show, and I show my hand, and it's good. So in this hand, I have the button straddle, and the cutoff limps in. We look down at 6-7 offsuit, and just decide to check it back and take a flop. Flop is ace 5-3 rainbow. Cutoff checks to us. We do have a gut shot, so we have some equity and no showdown value whatsoever. So a bet is reasonable, but I feel like with the board being ace high, I feel like what we're repping with a bet is a little bit limited. So I just go ahead and check it back. Turn is another ace. He checks, I check. River's an offsuit 10. This time he puts out a bet, and I flip my cards up and say, can you beat it? And I muck. He says he can and shows me ace king. So pretty funny little situation there. Just obviously he was never going anywhere, and ace king good. So we are 7 or 8 handed, and finally I look down at a pretty premium hand. I look down at pocket queens from early position, raise it up to 35. The player on my direct left re-raises, puts in a 3-bet to 135. Folds back to me. This player, he plays a decent number of hands, but he doesn't get too 3-bet happy, I guess you could say. Not putting in too many re-raises before the flop. Playing a fairly wide range, a fairly wide calling range pre-flop, but not a very wide 3-bet range. So between that and being in early position with all this action, and being somewhere around 15 to 2,000 effective, not sure I'm looking to put in a 4-bet and face a 5-bet and then have to make a decision as to whether to go with it or not. Could be a tricky situation. So I just put in a flat call. I make the flat call. And we go heads up to a flop. Flop comes 8-6-5 with 2 hearts. Shouldn't change too much, I wouldn't think. Shouldn't connect with him too much, so we are either still ahead or still behind, I would think. So I check, and my opponent bets 160. One of those situations where I think I only get worse to fold with a raise, so I just call. It's starting to become apparent that I'm getting pretty good at turning favorable queens, especially the offsuit variety. That's what the turn is. I check it over to him again. I expect him to continue with his good hands, but this time he checks. So one of those spots, once again, a little bit disappointing. Not getting the value once I turn the beautiful offsuit queen. River is an interesting card. River is an offsuit king. I think it's a really good card for us because a lot of the time, the majority of the time, it will either connect with him or he can use it as a bluff card. So with that reasoning in mind, expecting him to be betting the king pretty frequently, I decided to check it over to him, and he puts out a bet. He puts a pretty sizable bet too. He bets $500. So there will be some percentage of the time where he decided to pot control with pocket kings and just re-got there, which would be a pretty sick scenario. The rest of the time, I expect him to have aces, ace king, some sort of a bluff, and that's about it. Putting in a flat call just feels a little bit too scared. Not enough combos, I don't think, of pocket kings to warrant a flat call, especially when, if we put in a raise, it could potentially be perceived as a missed draw, whether that's a flush draw, straight draw, or some combination of the two. So with that in mind, I decide to go for the maximum and jam all in, and it's about 1,500 effective, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. My opponent goes into the tank, so that's actually really good news, of course. We fade the snap call. We don't get the snap call, which means he doesn't have pocket kings, so clearly have the best hand here. So after thinking for a little while, my opponent makes the call and we roll it over. Very good news. He shows us ace king. We're gonna take down a pretty sizable pot here finally, after many hours of garbage hands, lots of folding, lots of whiffing, lots of not connecting. Finally connect in a big way, and our opponent connects as well. So pretty sweet situation. The river worked out. The river play worked out. Got a great run out for our hand, and taking down, like I said, pretty nice pot here. Very good news, ladies and gentlemen. We've set a new high water mark. Pretty good streak we're on here. Tonight, we book a win of $3,480.